We try to make these videos like 30 to 40 minutes. You're going to need to either manage the property yourself or hire a property manager to do it for you.
Okay, so those are things to think about.
What is property management?
So the property manager is...
It's not me. It's not you. It's me. No, in this case, it was you.
It was you.
We need our money on time. Into the bathroom, in the shower, had just hair like someone had just shaved a dog or a whole back. It was just clearly disgusting. Greetings, beautiful people. Welcome back. This episode is really focused in on our folks that are trying to get into the real estate market. Whether you're trying to get into multifamily, single family, commercial, whatever it is, you're going to need to either manage the property yourself or hire a property manager to do it for you. And we really want to kind of go through the steps on what to do when thinking about before, during, and after as far as being a property manager, and how do you determine whether you're going to be a good person to do it or you go get someone else to do it. All right.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of the Melanated Married Millionaires in the Making show, aka the M4 Show. Make sure you tap in with us at www.them4show.com. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at the M4 Show. And lastly, if you get any value out of this episode, please share it with a friend, family member, cousin, auntie, mailman, whoever, so that they can win as well. Now let's get into the episode.
If this is your first time tapping into the M4 Show, my name is Devon Travell, creator of Black Wall Street, the board game. And of course, I have with me my resident real estate professional, my amazing person, my wife, my queen, the eyebrow dancing, the luscious locks locking. Please introduce yourself.
What is up, everybody? My name is Sinclair, aka the health nerd.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of locks, it's always a little bit awkward for me when someone comes up and like we see somebody and then they compliment locks because I don't know who they're talking to. There's been a few scenarios where someone's been like, "Okay, locks," and I'm like, "Oh," and they're like, "Devon." I'm like,
tragic.
Yeah,
can't help it.
They're so nice.
Oh, whenever we see Sis, hopefully you know who Sis is. She's always like, "Oh my gosh, Sinclair, your locks are so beautiful."
Fill in the cup.
Oh my
Fill in the
gosh.
cup. I'd be like, "Thank you, thank you." There's been a couple other times where I'm like, "Oh yeah, thank you." They're like, "Devon Growth." I'm like, "Yeah, babe,
get it."
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think Jaid gave it to both of us.
He did.
He was like, "Both y'all."
I mean, that was not a scenario.
I see you. So we appreciate it. It does fill the cup, especially if you know the lock journey is a rough first 3 to 6 to 9 months. It's a rough
to 12
to 12. So like once you get on the other side of that and people start complimenting and seeing it, it's a good feeling. And I think real estate could be the exact same.
Deep.
The first 3 months, you're into it, you're doing your searching, you're finding your properties, you purchased the property, now you're looking at getting the renter, and it feels good. It's a honeymoon phase for the first 3 to 6 months. And then things start happening. People stop paying rent. Sinks start flooding. HOA starts increasing. All these things start popping off, and you're like, where was this in the YouTube videos?
They don't talk about it.
They don't talk about it. We're going to talk about it today. Queen, talk to us about what property management even is from a high level, whether we do it or we hire someone else to do it. What is property management?
So the property manager is who is really going to be the person collecting rent. Think about it like once you are renting out a space, a room, a condo, an apartment, a house, this is now a business. So your property manager is almost like the manager for that business, right? They're going to make sure that rent is collected. That's going to be who actually collects the rent. It's going to be who corresponds with the tenant, right? You as the owner don't have to be the person actually physically collecting the rent. You can be, but it's also the person who's going to make sure that like any repairs are made, right? If anything goes wrong, this is the person providing kind of that customer service to the tenant as well. So think about the fact that, again, if you're renting out a space, you're providing a service to a customer, which is the tenant. So that property manager is kind of like the person offering that customer service, whereas you are the business owner as the property owner. Again, you can also be the property manager, but this is really, I think that's the question you have to ask yourself: is do you want to be that person? Because again, not everybody wants to be associated or wants the person to even know that they own the building, which we tried to do.
Is that what we did?
We tried to do that at first. I slipped up a couple of times, so.
So let's zoom back a little bit. Let's say you have a condo or a house that you've owned, and now you are renting out that house to other people. Why did you not want the tenants to know we were also the owners of that real estate?
Really kind of for safety of like, if for some reason they wanted to do ill towards you and your finances, right? If you rolling up, you rolling up in your Benz, this is not us.
I was like, who? What Benz you got that I don't know?
But if they decide, you know what, I'm gonna sue you for something or whatever, they could come after you. They could come after your property. They could come after other things you own. But yeah, I think it's also even like if for tenant issues, you want a property manager who is designated for these issues. If it is you, then yeah, you're going to be the person that they come to with their problems. If it's not you, you don't want them coming to your house talking about my fridge is broken. So I think it also just creates a barrier between you as the owner and the property and the tenant as well.
Agreed. I think another thing that I might add to that is I think it creates a barrier for you to see this as business and not personal.
Yes.
Right? Because especially during COVID or during other hard times within the economy, people might not have the rent. Right? Or they might not say, oh, I don't got it this week. Can I get a couple extra weeks or can I get a couple extra months to pay the rent? And I think if you take the standpoint of I'm the property manager, this bill needs to get paid, and it's my responsibility to collect the payment no matter what, rather than being I'm the owner of the house. If I want to be lenient, I can be lenient. And I think that's me. I would be the person where it's like, oh, they have their kids, they have their dog, their mom's living there. They got, some hardship maybe happening. They can't pay. You know what? Let's reduce the rent, Sinclair. Let's make it easy. It's okay, but that's not profitable for the business of real estate.
Right.
So for me, separating them makes it easier for me to say, nope, we're the property manager. This is our role: collect, serve, and make the house hospitable for them. But at the end of the day, we need our money on time.
I like that point because again, it gives the illusion that you answer to somebody else.
Exactly.
Right. I'm not the decision maker in this. All I know is that the owner, they want their rent. They want their money. So again, it just creates that barrier, and I think it makes it easier to be cut and dry with like, this is how it needs to happen, which I know is it difficult for people. It was difficult for my first year. For me, it only really takes one time of like people not paying rent to realize like, oh no, I'm losing in this scenario.
Yeah.
Like we are losing as a business, and of course, thinking that our real estate portfolio is our wealth. This is where our wealth is housed. So this is what I'm passing down to my kids. You messing with my children's inheritance.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Once you start messing with that, you got to go. And I feel like another thing, I know this is kind of a tangent, but I think it is important because it keeps, I think, a lot of people from possibly getting into real estate is they don't want to be a landlord or a slumlord. Keep in mind, a slumlord is somebody who doesn't take care of their place. So if you are in upholding, like our place is always in pristine condition, right? And we make sure of that because I would never want to be a slumlord. God. But if you take care of the tenant, if you are offering your service in an upstanding way, then you don't have to worry about that. But I think other people don't want to have to like, oh, I don't want to have to evict somebody. I don't want to have to. And yes, it is, especially living in California where there is a lot of, there is a homelessness, epidemic. But I think you have to think of it as a business because at the end of the day, in no other scenario is it socially acceptable to steal something or to take somebody's money or to ask for a service and not pay for it, right? In any other scenario, if you take something from the store, everybody pretty much knows like that's not a good thing to do, right? If you go to the hair salon, you get your hair done and you don't pay the hairdresser, right? That's not okay. That's not okay. And people, that is not socially acceptable to do. But for some reason, when it comes to real estate, the waters get a little bit murky. But again, if you understand you are a business owner, you are running a business, it makes it a little bit easier to understand that I'm not offering you this service for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a nonprofit, right? And so I think it makes it a little bit easier to yes, sometimes it's okay to give a little bit of leniency, but there has to be a line.
For sure.
And once that line is crossed, you have to do what's right for the business. So wanted to talk about that.
Indeed. Something else that I feel like is not always acceptable in certain communities is hitting people to remember an answer.
I'm sorry.
Is that no? It's fine. But I feel like that's like so cultural. I feel like I think I do the same thing.
I'm like,
as well. What is it? What is it? I don't know what about that connection, that physical force that just helps your neural pathways connect. Funny. But also, sorry, in a serious note, as you're watching this podcast, let us know in the comments, are you leaning towards managing yourself or are you leaning towards hiring a property manager? Let us know what you're thinking at first. And then I want to circle back to that question at the end after we go through what happens before, during, and after and see if we change some minds.
Oh, that's perfect. I was going to talk about it now, but I guess it does make sense to go at the end. Once you talk about, let's talk about what goes into property management. That could probably give you a better idea if it's for you or not. So I want to break it down to before, during, and after, like he said, like a checklist, if you will, of things to do before, during, and after. Mind you, the before list is pretty beefy. That's where the bulk
hefty.
of it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to approach this of, let's say this is your first property you bought, your first tenant that you're getting in the spot. So whether that's you're buying it as an investment property, or you did like us, technically we kind of house hacked, where we lived in it for a year or two and then moved out and are now renting it out. Either way, you're going to have a tenant coming in there. So there are things you need to do. First things first, make sure that it is renter ready, right? And that means making repairs, checking the appliances, like everything should work.
Step one.
That sounds like duh, but you would be surprised. Like if there's a little outlet that doesn't work, you as the owner may be like, I'll fix that later, right? A tenant is going to be like, why does this outlet not work? I need this fixed. So you really do have to make sure like it's up to standards, not just what it's acceptable to you while you were living there. It needs to be like everything needs to be in working order, or you need to make sure that it's disclosed ahead of time. Like just so you know that outlet doesn't work and we're not getting it fixed. I don't recommend that. I recommend just investing and getting it fixed. But yeah, making sure that those things are ready. And also, again, learn from our mistakes. Make sure you have the right insurance policy. This is more of a factor if you previously lived in it and are now moving out, because that is a different insurance policy that is required, right? If you're buying it as an investment property, you're probably automatically going to get a landlord's, basically insurance policy that covers it because you are not living there. But something to think about is if you did live there and are now moving out for someone else to move in, you have to change your real estate or your insurance policy to now be for a tenant.
It's a great little nugget right there, y'all. Don't sleep on that. It's a great, small, but very actionable nugget.
Because if if something happens and you do need to submit a claim, they may be like, you're not living there, that we're not going to honor this, right? Because you don't have the right policy. So it's very important to make sure that you have the right policy. Okay, so next we've got determine the rent, right? How much are you actually going to charge? This is all before you have the tenant in there. How much are you going to charge? And I think for that, you need to look at comparables, right? So you need to look at the units around you, whether you're in a building, again, whether it's a house or in a condo or anything like that, you need to look at other comparable houses or condos in the area and what they're renting for.
Right.
Because you don't want to be too far below. You also don't want to be too far above. Unless you have those types of amenities that says like, I actually can charge a little bit more than everything around here because, a
basketball court. Yeah, you balling out of control. Go ahead and charge a little extra. In-unit laundry.
Those are things that, again, if you look at the comparables and everybody's paying $2,000, but it's with a laundry, facility. If you have in-unit laundry, hike it up a little bit because you have in-unit laundry. But let's say, for example, for our condo, we actually don't have a whole lot of amenities because it's really just a building. So we don't have the pool. We don't have, a lot of the fancy stuff. There's no really central office. So those are things we had to take into consideration and think like, we can't charge what the other, really big wig, big company, big building types of things are charging because we don't have those types of amenities. So we did take that to account.
Yeah.
But it did kind of balance out because we also know like ours has a big living room with a nice chef's kitchen that these other places do not.
Parking.
Yes. So it's just about, and this is again where the business aspect comes into it, right? You got to take all of these things into account and like, no, we don't have this, but we do have this, because basically all these things are going to justify what you're charging for the rent.
Sorry, go finish that thought. I have two things. Go ahead, finish that thought though.
I was just going to say, so when you post the listing, you're calling out all of these things, right? Beautiful chef's kitchen, balcony overlooking the neighborhood, right? Calling out those things so it justifies what you're charging for them.
Sell that unit.
Yeah, sell it, man.
Sell that unit. One thing that I want to say is you also want to keep in mind what is your out-of-pocket cost each month for the unit, right? So maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have a rent and you're doing rental arbitrage, whatever it is. How much do you need to pay out of pocket? And that's also going to be an adjustment on where you want to set the rent for when the person comes in. You got something on that?
That is a fine balance. That should be a factor. But keep in mind, you cannot charge $1,000 over the market rent just because your interest rate is high and you pay more for your mortgage, right? Unfortunately, you're likely not going to find somebody who's actually going to pay that. So unfortunately, in that scenario, you may just be eating a couple $100 each month, right? So it is finding that balance. But how much your mortgage is, as long as it's under what you're paying for rent, I think is a way to balance, find that balance.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I want to add is, which I don't know if we're going to talk about this, short-term rental, property management, whether you're doing it or someone else is doing it. So instead of looking at what apartments.com might be for a long-term rental or looking at Craigslist, whatever, do people still use Craigslist?
I'm sure some people.
Yeah, Facebook Marketplace, whatever people are using these days in 2024. Also look at Airbnb and figure out, okay, VRBO, what are the short-term daily rentals that I can get for this house as well? And maybe if you have the house with the high interest rate, it might not be a good move for long-term because you're always going to be under. So it might be a better move for short-term. You can charge more per night and hopefully get your full mortgage, right? So it's about strategy and what works for your goals and your needs.
That's a great point that I actually didn't have to talk about, but I'm glad you brought up, because that is an easy way to get around my mortgage is high, how can I make sure that I'm getting enough income in, is yes, if you're doing a long-term lease, which usually means a year or more, then you're going to have to kind of go with what the other what the market is around for a year. But if you're talking about a short-term rental, where again, this is something where people are coming in to stay for the weekend or for a week, anything under a month, then you're charging nightly, right? You're not charging for the month, you're charging nightly. So that is there's some different calculations that you need to take into consideration there, like vacancy, because right, if you have one tenant in for the year, then they're going to be there for the whole year. If we're talking about short-term rental, then in a given month, you're likely not going to have it booked out for the entire month. So you need to kind of, again, find those vacancy rates. There's another comparable you need to find, right? Find the vacancy rate and determine like how much you would realistically make in a month. But typically you can make more with a short-term rental than you can with a long-term.
Yes, ma'am.
Great point.
Thank you.
Yes. And we're going to remind me to come back to that when we get to the end, when we talk about like, should you be the property manager or not? Because short-term versus long-term is a very different game
for sure when
we're talking about property management. I briefly wanted to mention some resources that you can use to find those rent comparables. So you can go on like apartments.com, anywhere where people are going to find these housing options. Apartments.com, Zillow, Trulia, also pretty much any place where people are going to find houses to buy. There's also people on there looking for houses to rent. So again, the Zillows, the Trulias, the Redfins, Rent.com, Rent Cafe, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. There's a bunch of different.
Craigslist made it. Okay.
Did make it.
Popping.
They did make it. So, I think, again, putting your business owner hat on, think about what type of demographics are going to be on these different listings that may be able to help you determine which one you're going to at least start with. I don't know that you need to put them on all of them. Like, we use one platform and have been solid with that one platform because we only have one unit. If you got a whole building, that's different. But if you're talking about one unit, I would choose one, maybe two, and just stick with those. Next, create your lease and determine what your terms are going to be, right? So you've got, this is what I'm going to charge for rent. Now you need to determine, what am I going to allow in this space? So things like pets. Are you going to have pets or not? That seems like easy, but you have to think about the space, right? A good determinant on whether you should allow pets or not is one, if your building allows them. It might not be it may be a moot point. But also the type of floors you have, right? If you have carpet, say no to pets. Oh, let me help you out right now. Say no to pets because it's going to smell disgusting. But if you have laminate or hardwood floors or something like that, where it's relatively easy, if there is a little mess for the owner or for the tenant to clean it up, then you may be better off offering pets. People who have pets are typically also willing to pay more because a lot of people do not want pets. So you are putting, right, if you're talking about a niche, right? Again, if you have your space set up to where you can if you have hot laminate floors or something like that, and there is space maybe around for the, to go for them to go do their business when they go outside, like those are things to think about. But you could put yourself in another bracket of units that are offering pets. And so that can allow you to charge more.
Oh, goodness. I just have a slight horror story. When our first tenant moved out and we went in there to clean, and I can go through a tangent on cleaning too. I don't know.
It's later on.
It's later? Okay, I'll wait. But we walked in there and we had hardwood floors, but it smelled like 100% dog pee. And we scrubbed, we cleaned, we soaked, and that smell stayed there for at least a month.
Yeah.
Finally, the new tenant came in, and they had their own situation. So I feel like I don't know if the smell left or if it was just disguised by people actually living.
It was a lot better. It was basically gone by the time because we had the windows open. We kept them open. We had to we did our own scrubbing, and then we also hired a cleaning crew. So I think after that and letting it air out for a bit. And so you mentioned the month, which I'll come back to as well, but that allowed it to air out. But we have determined again, because we don't offer a lot of the other amenities, we are going to allow pets because it allows us to charge a little bit more. And we also make them pay a pet deposit now because it's going to cost a little bit more to have a little bit more time and effort to make sure in between tenants we're getting all of that stuff out. So yes, pets. Late rent fees, right? What does late rent look like? How many days? You get to determine all of that, right? How many days after the initial due date is considered late, and what is your late rent fee? Your lease term. So how long are you going to allow somebody to be in the unit? Are you going to sign a 6-month lease term, a year long, 2-year long, or are you doing month to month? These are all options you have. Recommend you look at the state you're in and what laws there are for these different lease terms, because month to month versus a year, they have different rules on what needs to happen in what amounts of time, how long you can tell them they have to leave, like all those things. I'm not going to get into that now, but definitely look into your state's laws.
I was going to ask you if you had a suggested range for the late rental fee. And then if you had any suggestion for the lease term. Before I do that, I have to, of course, say disclaimer and make sure you talk to your real estate professional. This is for educational purposes only, and for sure cannot be mentally liable or
This is strictly from what we've learned in our first couple of years. This is our opinions. Don't come for us.
So rental late fee.
This really is just dependent.
$1,000?
Oh God, no. Like $25, $50, like something reasonable. You want it to be a deterrent for them to, turn in late rent. But you can't make it cost an arm and a leg because then they just won't pay it.
And does it every month? It adds the 25 or 50, or it's a one-time $50
every month?
Every month it stacks on.
Every month it stacks on. But also keep in mind, right, we're in California, so our late rent charge is $50, but it is a small portion of the rent because we're in California. If you are in some place where rent is only $1,000, like $50 may be a little bit more unreasonable, so you may want to take it down. So just keep that in mind.
Nice.
But yeah, I would say, like for us, I'll just let you know what we do. So rent is due on the 1st.
On the 1st.
It is late after the 5th. So on day 6, and I set this up all automatically. I'm not texting you, letting you know there's a late fee because you will get the notification from apartments.com. We're not being sponsored, but we are open to it because I love apartments.com.
Very smooth.
But on day 6, it automatically charges the $50. And so they will see late fee, $50, and it will get added to their tab basically. And it's very visual. So that is what we do. It has worked for us so far. But you got to decide. Some people are more cut and dry, like it is due on the 1st, late on the 2nd. That's up to you.
12 a.m.
I give a little more leeway because again, we're in California. You may need a couple extra days. That's fine. But on day 6, run it. You asked another question. Lease term.
Yeah, you can skip it though.
Okay. I do actually, but now that you brought it up, this is going to be a longer episode. So now that you brought it up, I would recommend starting with no more than a year the first go around. The reason why I recommend that is it automatically, unless it is renewed, will automatically go to month after the first year.
Why?
California.
That's California law.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So once it's month to month, again, there's just a little bit more you got to do with a month-to-month tenant in terms of giving them a certain amount of notice for things than for a year lease. And so I would recommend do a trial run. That's what kind of the methodology that we were doing is your first year is a trial run. So I'm going to do a year-long lease at first so that we can see, is this a good tenant that I would want to renew for another year? That's how we decided to do it. I would not recommend starting out with like a 2-year lease because if in the first year you decide this is not working, you don't have to evict them. You don't have to all you can say is I'm not renewing your lease after the first year, and then they got to go. Versus again, if you go to if you start off with month to month and it's not working out, you got to evict them now.
Gotcha.
So that's why I recommend. That's my methodology on why we started with a year. Your year is basically the trial run, and then after that we can decide again if they seem like really solid and they want to go to month. If they've been really good for the first year, I will be more open to that. Otherwise, I just keep it on another year. And again, I like to do that because I know at maximum I'm gonna have to deal with this for a year before I can just not renew your next lease, and then you got to get out. Okay, so those are things to think about. You also want to develop your, I'm sorry, there's more things to think about when your lease. Subletting, just don't allow it. Don't allow it. Leave it there. Subletting is when someone else can lease their space out. Let's say I'm renting your apartment, but I want to rent out my back room because I'm not using it. No. No.
Airbnb.
Yeah, that basically allows the renter to Airbnb your space out. It's like Inception. Just say no, because they're not going to have too much control over what happens to that room. They don't own the property. They're not going to care as much. Just say no to subletting. How do you want them to pay rent? Whether you're going to do it like through your platform, Zelle, check, cash, however you want to do it. Security deposit. The maximum in California can be 1 month's rent. And that is the deposit that is in addition to rent that can be used for repairs, cleaning, that type of thing once they move out. Renter's insurance. Are you going to require them to have renter's insurance? I recommend it. And all you really need to say is that it's a requirement and they go get their own. And then inspection requirements. So this is something you want to put in your lease. How often do you want to go into the space and do a visual inspection, check to make sure they are taking care of the property? Whether that's once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, you decide. But this is, once they sign the lease, they are agreeing to these terms. So you want to make sure it is in the lease. Anything else you want to add for the lease term?
Yes, Sinclair. Thank you for asking. I would like to, like the news people are always so awkward.
Yeah, they are.
And now it's you, Sinclair, on the field. Thanks, Bob. But something I want to add is background check and verification of.
That's next.
That's during, but they're already there.
No, we're talking about just the lease term.
Oh.
You're talking about this tenant screening, which we'll talk about next. Great segue.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Now we're going to talk about tenant screening and all the different things you need to think about when evaluating a tenant.
Do-do-do.
So, You want to develop your tenant screening process as the next step. So, segue back. I'm giving back to you.
Background check. You want to make sure that the person that you have living in your house is either one, a upstanding citizen, or two, you are completely aware of their background and you're also willing to have that demographic with you, which is another niche market and there is funding for that as well, right? But you just want to make sure you understand who you're dealing with before they come into your house. Step two is income verification. You have, what was that? Was that like a no, or was that like a yeah? Okay. Step two is you set your rent for $1,200, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, whatever it is. Do they have the job and the income that can allow them to sustainably, reliably, without hesitation, pay that mortgage or that rent every single month? And you want to get check stubs, call their job, make sure they really work at Wendy's if they said they work at Wendy's, make sure they really work for Play Black Wall Street if they say they work for Play Black Wall Street. It's a small team. They probably don't. It's on their application. But yeah, those things. Pass it back to you, love.
And I would say for income, a good just general rule of thumb is that you want them to be earning at least 3 times the rent monthly.
That's good.
So that makes sure if something happens, the car breaks down, whatever, they have a good cushion so that they can still pay rent. If they're only making 2 times the rent, there's not a lot of cushion there. If something happens, they're probably going to be late late for rent that month.
Good.
Credit report, that's another thing you can check. And it's really just to check on, like, are there any red flags, right? You have to keep in mind that, like, there are some things that you can use to actually screen and say, like, no, I don't want this client. Other things are just good to knows. So, like, I think there's actually, like, recently, I think they changed the laws on the background checks. It's more of a good to know now, but you can't actually use that information to say, no, I'm not taking this, I think for like nonviolent crimes or something like that. You can't actually use that to evaluate or, say no to a tenant. So again, that's just for California. Please look at your state's laws. And then you want to call their references. The references should be a part of the application where they have to tell you, here is my boss at my job. Here is my current landlord, so that you can call and verify everything that they're saying. And I would definitely recommend to do so because you want to know, if they, not only their current place, but their last place too, like the one before that, because you want to know why they left. Right? Did they get kicked out? Or did they, just move or something like that? So those are all good things to do. And then lastly, or second to lastly, of course, just collect the applications and schedule tours. I would recommend offering tours because, a couple $1,000s a month is going to be a pretty hefty investment. You want them to be comfortable with the space. You want them to see the space, know what they are agreeing to, because you want to avoid them just like, oh yeah, sounds good, I want it. And then they get in the space and they're like, complaints after complaints after complaints. You want them, I always recommend, like, we had one person that was like, I don't really need to see it. I was like, no, please come in and see it. Because again, I don't want you to get into the space and then not realize, the neighborhood, the little splash of paint on the wall. Like, I want you to know this is how it's coming. So make sure you come and see it and you're comfortable with it before you sign the lease.
I think it's also a good way of testing the communication between you and the tenant. Right? How quick do they text back? Do they answer the phone? Do they have a voicemail set up? Because if you don't have a voicemail set up, it's a point against you. Right? I'm just kidding. But I do think that, like, having a voicemail set up, like, oh, hi, this is Devon's phone. Please leave a message. It gives that extra intentionality and also professionalism. So that means you're dealing with maybe a little bit of a different person that just says, mailbox is full and you cannot accept messages. But you want to know, do they communicate back and forth? If they say they're going to show up at 9 a.m. for the tour, do they show up at 9? Do they show up at 9:30? Do they show up at 8:45? Now you get to just see who is this person that's going to be living in your house or your investment property, and what are their habits and their way of being.
Yeah. Okay, and then this is really the last thing, and you don't necessarily...
Is it though?
For before, yes. You don't necessarily need to do this before they come in, but I think it can be a good thing to just have ready to go, which is to find, like, your go-to businesses, your go-to resources. For, I would say, 3, you need to have, like, ready to go. Plumber. Handyman, which I don't know what's the technical term for that. handy man, woman, person.
Handy person.
Handy person. And a cleaning service. I'd say those three, like, have on lock, have the person you're going to for those things. Because especially a plumber, you gonna be calling the plumber at least once during that year long, if not 3, 4, 5 times. If you have a what's it called, garbage disposal that likes to clog like ours does. So those are the three that I would recommend having ready to go, so that if you get that call, you get that text, you get that email, hey, this is broken, you automatically know, like, all right, I'm just going to call this person, I'm going to reach out to this business, whatever it is, rather than having to like call a bunch of people and get quotes, and that just delays the process. So again, I'm coming from the mindset of making sure that you are offering a good service to your tenant. So you want to be ready to go for things like that.
Boom.
Yep.
All right. So as you can see, the before, heavy lift.
Yeah.
All right. So if you are on the fence about whether I do the property management myself or I hire somebody, if you already have a full-time job and you're going to be doing this by yourself, might want to outsource.
We'll talk about it.
Talk about it?
Yeah.
All right.
But just so you know, these are all the things you need to think about. And like you said, from my experience, it is a heavy lift for long-term rentals, at least a heavy lift before and after. The during, not so much. But it's a good segue into during the lease, right? So we're talking about, for us, it will be a year-long lease, the first year that this tenant is in the property. Of course, arguably the most important thing is to make sure that they are paying rent on time.
Hello.
And if they are not, you want to be diligent about being on them, with whatever methodology you see fit. So the late fee, however you're going to initiate the late fee, make sure from the very first time that rent is late. Hopefully you don't see that within the first couple of months. Otherwise, that's a red flag.
Right.
But you want to make sure that you are diligent with the late fee. And you want to be sure that you are also familiar with your area's process for what happens when they don't pay rent, right? So typically it's a 3-day notice first. I mean, for me, I'm sending texts first, like, hey, just a reminder, like, rent is due. Is everything okay? When can we expect the rent? That's what I just like to do first, so that I'm looking for it, right? And then if they're like, oh yeah, I just got to get the check, it'll be there tomorrow, cool. Then I'm not going to stress about it until that becomes a lie. But if this starts to become a pattern, or if you notice, like, okay, whenever they said they were going to turn in rent, they're not doing it, you have to start taking the next steps, which typically the first official step is a 3-day notice. Again, I don't want to get into the full, like, how you get somebody out the property. That's a whole nother episode. But you need to at least have a 3-day notice ready to go, a template ready to go. And that 3-day notice is basically, you have 3 days to pay the rent, or you'll have to leave. It's not an eviction notice. This is separate from an eviction notice. It's just like the warning that you have 3 days to figure it out.
Is this an email? Is this posted on the door? What is the method for the 3-day?
So it has to be either delivered to them at their place, or you can find. Well, I don't recommend this. You can technically go to their work and like hand it to them, like their place of employment,
like
if you know where
they
work.
Like you serving them.
Right. You could technically do that. I wouldn't recommend it personally. That seems like somebody might come after you after that. But yeah, you could deliver it to their house. You could post it on the door.
Mail.
I think in California you have to do one of those two options and then also mail it. But yeah, this is something, it's like an official, like you're getting an official legal process started. So you need to make sure you're doing it the right way. You cannot just email it. It's not going to be a valid 3-day notice if you email it. So again, look up your state's laws. We're just familiar with California at this point. But the 3-day notice is what happens when someone does not pay rent. So make sure you at least have a template ready to go so you don't have to scramble and figure that out in the moment. Make repairs in a timely manner. We've talked about that. But if they say, hey, the dishwasher's not working, or hey, there's a leak, hey, whatever it is, make sure that you're on it in a timely manner, right? You don't want to be like, okay, yeah, got it. And then like a month.
6 months
later. Right. Then you start to be put in that slumlord category, right? You want to make sure this is the place that they are living, right? You want to make sure that it is habitable. You want to make sure that if things are not working, that you are getting them fixed in a timely manner. Because think about it. In the best case scenario, you have a tenant who's paying rent. They're respectful to your place. You want them to stay as long as possible if you have a good tenant, because then you don't have to worry about going out and finding a new tenant every year, right? That's ideal. Right. If you find somebody that is good on paying the rent and wants to stay, but them wanting to stay is probably going to be determinant on the type of service that you're offering as a property manager. So on time.
Even for yourself, I think you want to solve problems as soon as possible, because a leak that's been there for a month, quick fix. A leak that's been there for 7, 8, 9, 10 months, now you have mold,
Water damage.
now you have water damage, it could be structural damage. So by them living there and them pointing out the problems as soon as possible, they're also helping you out to maintain your investment for as long as possible.
Yep. On that note, keep track of any expenses and repairs that you are making, right? Note them, how much they cost, what was happening, because that's going to be important in the business aspect, right? You know that you've got money coming in, but you also have money coming out for these types of expenses. Not only for the mortgage, but the expenses is another operating expense for your business. So you want to make sure you're keeping track of this. And even for tax purposes, you want to make sure you're keeping track of all expenses that come from you managing this property. Inspections. We talked about inspections when we were talking about the lease, right? So whatever your lease says in terms of annual inspections, biannual, whatever it's going to be. For ours, it's once a year. We have an inspection. So you want to make sure you are actually going through with the inspection, which basically means you give them 24 hours at notice. That's at least in California, you have to give them 24 hours, I believe, notice of, hey, this is when the inspection is going to be.
You can't just do that Cardi B song.
You can't
pop up. Guess who?
No. That's very not legal.
Okay.
You want to make sure you're scheduling the inspection, right? You don't have to pop up on them. I think that, again, I believe it's at least 24 hours in advance. You have to let them know I'm coming by for the inspection. Then you just go and you can literally check whatever you need to check, right? You want to check again floors. Does it smell like piss? Does it smell?
Hopefully dog.
Ooh, yeah. Hopefully. Or hopefully not, either way. But if it is, anyways. Yes, you want to check things like that, right? How is it being maintained? Again, do the appliances work? And basically, this is just your checkup. If there are repairs that need to be made at that time, go ahead and make them. If there needs to be a mid-year cleaning, like that's a good time to schedule it. You want to, again, if you're noticing like, okay, there's a little bit, I think the dog peed in this corner, you want to get that cleaned up as soon as possible, because once that has time to settle, it's going to be very difficult to get out. So those are things you want to make sure.
The wise words of Jennifer Hudson. I'm not going. You're the best floor.
Ew. Ew. And then lastly, again, just for like customer service, just check in with the tenant every now and then. Hey, how are things going, right? We had a new dishwasher that we got installed. Hey, is the dishwasher working? Like, any problems with it? Again, just that customer service, that they know that you actually care about how they're doing in the unit and if it's meeting their needs. So that's everything that I have for during. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that's fabulous. An extra thing that I think I want to get to eventually when I think of us being property managers or owning a large portfolio is either holiday gifts, birthday gifts, renew gifts, something that like they get something while they're there, that again, that extra customer service shows them that we care.
Yeah.
So it could be a small birthday token. We send them a gift card to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever it is, or it could be every year for the holidays, for Thanksgiving. We send them a $25 gift card to Honey Baked Ham, just something that shows them like we care and we have those family values. That's not something that we do currently, but that's on my radar for when we have a larger portfolio.
Yeah, that's good. We did actually, for our very first tenant, they had moved in right after the holidays. We had like I think a popcorn like basket thing that we left them. So that was a nice little touch. But yeah, I think that keep in mind that if we're talking about short-term rentals, you mentioned that you're pretty much doing this process every time someone comes and leaves, right? Now, again, if they only stayed for a weekend, there shouldn't be any repairs that need to be made over a weekend. One would hope. But you're going to need to make sure that someone is upkeeping with the property every now and then. You have somebody cleaning. The cleaning is going to need to be done every time someone comes or leaves. So
every time.
Every time.
And I say this because we stayed at an Airbnb. Multiple times this has happened, but in particular, it's been 2 times specifically. But one time, this was the time that I proposed to my soon-to-be wife, at the time fiance. She's sitting right here in case you didn't know. And we went back to our Airbnb, and it was literally disgusting. We pulled back the blanket. There was all types of hair and stains on the blanket. Went into the bathroom, in the shower, had just hair like someone had just shaved a dog or a whole back. It was just clearly disgusting, and they didn't have a cleaning team that came out routinely. And yeah, that was a really bad experience. So if you want your customers, the people that stay at your house, short term or long term, to have a pleasant, amazing experience, clean often. Thank you. This is a public service announcement.
There you go. It was a really like, at that point, we were like, we're not staying here. We went and stayed at a different hotel because it's like, I'm not washing my own sheets. Like, this is a lot of work. You should pay somebody for this. Yeah. But anyway, those are things to think about during. Now, after, right? Let's say, again, you have your, this is when someone is leaving. So let's say in our case, we decided not to renew with the first tenant we had in our unit because, what does that mean?
Peace. That's what that was.
Got you.
Peace.
Yes, we decided to not renew. So we sent them a non-renewal letter. We're not renewing your lease.
Yeah. And it wasn't us. It was you. You know, when you break up, it's not me. It's not you. It's me. No, in this case, it was you.
It was you. Rent was not being paid in a timely fashion. There was not communication being made. It smelled disgusting. We did not do an inspection. Again, you're learning from our mistakes. We did not do an inspection the first time. So I did not see the place inside until they moved out. Mistake. Because that's what, yeah, we smelled the nastiness. So again, all those things were like, nope, we're not renewing. So after the first year, we had to start this process of what happens when a tenant moves out. So my recommendation is, again, when you're starting off and you don't necessarily have these systems like ready to go and in place, is to give a month in between when the first tenant leaves and you have the next tenant comes. Hopefully you've already got that person lined up, right? But if not, leave a month. So for us, our person was leaving in December. We did not have the listing say that it's available until January 1st, because that gave us a month to go in, see what repairs need to be done, schedule all the, because we're both at this point, we're still doing it with full-time jobs. So I can't just go the next day and take care of everything and I'll be there all day and then come the next day. Like I got weekends to do this, unfortunately.
Ooh, so I want to backtrack, and then tie it back to right this moment. We didn't talk about pictures. So like the before you have it up, take all your pictures when it's clean, when it's fresh, maybe ideally when it's empty. That would be great. We had the pictures from before we purchased it. So it was perfect, right? All the clean pictures, no furniture, so that the tenant coming in can imagine what their space would look like. Right. So, and then now that you have these people that are moving out, you relist, put those same blank canvas pictures up so that people can see it. And then by the time the old tenant moves out, your new tenants can come in for the tour and hopefully see what it actually looks like. And hopefully it matches the pictures that you put on there for the before.
Yes. And for us, it was only 2 years from when we purchased it to when we were putting it up. And we took care of our property. So it looked the same. We put some fresh paint on it, but it looked the same as the empty pictures that we saw when we bought the unit. So we were able to use those pictures. But if you don't have those pictures, then yes, you need to get those pictures. And I would recommend getting a professional to take those pictures. Sure, you could go with iPhone, but you'd be surprised how many times I'm going on and when we were looking for a house to buy and you see the person in the mirror like this. It's like next.
Nope. Not
Right. No, hire a professional to take these pictures. These people's, it's their job to make it look nice. They got the lighting on point, like they'll stage it so it looks really nice.
You know what I'm saying? You better hire Jair.
Look.
Make your house look good. Come on.
But I would recommend getting professional photos. That was a great point.
Thank you, Sinclair. I do what I can. I understand you're the real estate professional. Every now and again, I like to sprinkle a little something in there.
I appreciate you. But yeah, if you can for this first time, leave a month in between the last tenant to the new tenant so you have time to do all these things, make the repairs, see what needs to get done. If it smells, you want to let it air out a bit. And then this also gives time. If you don't have the next tenant lined up, this gives you, if you take the first 1 to 2 weeks to get everything repaired, everything done, everything clean, then now you have another 2 weeks for tours. Some people, when they're looking for something, they're like, I need to move in now. Yeah. So don't think too much that you need to put it out too far ahead, because when people are looking, they're typically wanting to move immediately. So again, that gives you another 2 weeks to do tours, to find somebody to move in that following month. Perform an outgoing inspection. That would be something you would want to do immediately after they leave as well. And then again, that's the same thing you would do for if they were still living there. You want to look at the condition of everything, note the repairs, and get quotes for how much it's going to take to repair those things, because those expenses are what you can deduct from the security deposit, right? So a security deposit, again, is that cushion that you have for these types of things, for repairing, for cleaning after the tenant leaves. So this is the money that you have for these things. And so once you start, if things need to be repaired, you're docking that off of the security deposit, because legally whatever is left, you have to give back to the tenant. So you want to make sure you are documenting these things, because another step, and this is a minor thing, but you do have to give the money back or send them a letter on these are the things, that basically came out of the security deposit.
Question on that, and not sure if you have an answer yet, but when someone is multi-step question, you ready? First step, lock in, queen. First step, when someone renews their lease, do you get another security deposit, or do you keep the original?
You keep the original.
Keep the original. Okay. If for whatever reason they've been there 2, 3, 4 years, and the specific example that I'm thinking of is the house that we stayed in college. We had an initial security deposit, $450.
$400. Oh, Lord.
And we stayed there for 4 amazing college years. And there's no way $450 covered the amount of repair and cleaning that was needed. It was a low-key L, but we also never missed rent ever. So I mean, we stayed there for 4 years. They had one core tenant. They were good. But what I'm getting to is, if the repairs and cleaning are more than the security deposit, legally, are you able to say, hey, this place is messed up, I need another 200, or that's out of pocket?
It's out of pocket at that point. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about how much to charge for the security deposit. I would recommend going with the maximum allowable, which would be 1 month's rent.
Okay.
So you at least have, in our case, a couple $1,000s to work with. But yeah, if you only charge me $450, that's all that you can use in terms of like what you've already been given. Everything else is going to be considered out of pocket for you, or an operating expense for the business.
Gotcha.
But no, you cannot say like, now this is afterwards. Now, my understanding is if while the tenant is there, they break something, right? And it is on them, then you can say like, this is on you. You need to get this repaired, right? But if something is just broke, or like it's a wear and tear type of thing, then you have to pay for it. And those are also things to outline in your lease, right? If it is your fault, then you're gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
But if it's just something that broke, or if it's again a defect or something, a piece of equipment, then it's on the landlord. No. All these things you want to spell out in your lease. But to your point, after they leave, yeah, they're gone. You're not getting any more money out of them.
Nothing.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Okay.
So yeah, you can deduct these things from the security deposit, and whatever is left, you have to go ahead and send them back.
Nice.
Good question. Was
Thank
that
you.
All parts to it?
That was all parts. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. But that's pretty much what I have here. And then of course, once you've now been through the first year, you need to determine like what things are you going to now change for the next tenant, right? Are you going to increase rent? There are at least in California, there are maximums to how much you can increase rent. And I believe a lot of places are now putting, caps on rent increases. So you have to look up how much is it in your city. It's city by city. Like LA has rent caps versus like Riverside does not. So you have to be very knowledgeable about your area. How much are you going to charge for this next tenant? But I will say a benefit sometimes to having a tenant leave is now you can raise the rent and not have to be worried about can they still afford it, because you're now looking at a completely different new tenant, right? Whereas raising the rent while the tenant is there can be a little tricky because they either have to agree to it or they're now going to leave.
Is there a maximum you are allowed to raise the rent if they stay 1 year and they're going to renew the next year? Is there a maximum you can raise it?
There is. It's going to depend on your city and state again. But I believe it's still a maximum. Like I think the max you could do is 10%. Regardless.
Okay.
But that's significant to do in 1 year.
Yeah.
Like that's significant. I would not recommend, unless you're starting really low and you know that they can afford it. You also have to keep their income. You have their pay stub, so you have to keep that income in mind. And just know that raising the rent while the tenant is there, it's gonna be a gamble. Either they're gonna agree to it, and great, no harm done. But if they don't, now you have to go through the process of finding another tenant.
Yeah.
So all things to keep in mind. But then even your lease, right? Okay, we had the pet stay, it didn't work. So now next time we're not doing pets. Right? Whatever things that you want to now change for the new lease, make sure you're going in and updating those things. And speaking of lease, I would recommend using a platform or a template of some sort because they make it really easy. I was just actually on eForms the other day, kind of looking through, and they make it really easy. You can put in your state, and it asks you a question basically, like, are you going to allow pets? Yes or no? And then it fills it in. So that's a good place.
I was supposed to pick something up for my dad today, huh? We had a little easy form.
No.
We got that handle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We got it.
Nice.
But long story short, I would recommend using a template and doing it that way. And then, of course, you want to ideally consult with a lawyer of some sort just to make sure it's good. But if not, use a template. Make sure you really comb through it. You should read every single word on your lease term. This is not one of those, I'm downloading an app and it sends you the terms.
Oh, no.
Ain't nobody reading through that except Ryan Vernon.
Right,
and you're just like, agree. Do not treat your lease like this. This is your home. These are the terms that the tenant is going to agree to. Every single line you need to read, especially if you're using a template because you're not filling it in with all of your own words. So you need to make sure that exactly what it says is exactly what you want. So that is what I have for after a tenant leaves. You want to add anything there?
I do. I have two stories. I don't know what we're doing on time right now, but both of them have to do with cleaning, repairs, and the moral of both stories is do it right, don't do it cheap. For those that know me, I'm a little frugal, and I like to save money as much as possible on the front end. And both times we tried to save money and lost both money and time, which became really expensive. So number one, in getting the place cleaned afterwards, we went with a small Black-owned company that was suggested from my dad. He's like, "Oh, I met this person. They're doing this.
I forgot about that.
You forgot about?
Lord.
Look, I didn't. All right." And he was like, her rates are real competitive, real affordable. Here you go, try her out. We're like, all right, for sure, let's try it. This woman came through the house, and specifically, I remember the blinds, right? So, blinds can get dust on them sometimes. And she got her little duster, her little rag, and just wiped it. And then afterwards, it was still extremely dirty.
And she never flipped it around to the other side. Everybody knows the other side is where the dirt is.
Both sides. She was like, yeah, you should just get some new blinds. And we're like, we're not paying for new blinds. We're paying you to clean our current blinds. And she's like, no, just get new blinds.
Right. She was like, no, that's not this package. Like, you gotta. Are you serious?
What?
We said get it rent ready. In what world is it's acceptable?
Oh my God! And there were just other small things where it's like you didn't clean. What happened? So and then we had to hire another cleaning person who came through, did it right, and it was good. But again, we spent money 2 times, and it took more time.
Yeah.
Second thing, we had to paint the walls in the rooms because there was patches. You don't remember none of this.
This is why you don't property.
This is what this is not my job. This is not what I do.
Golly.
So story number 2, we were trying to paint the walls because there was a few marks. And I think we were also changing the color slightly just to be more
and they had put things on the walls that they weren't supposed to. They drilled in, so we had to get it patched up. Right. And now we got a white spot on the wall.
That's right. I forgot about that. So long story short, we were just like, all right, well, we want to get it renter ready as soon as possible. It's going to take us forever to paint. Let's just respectfully go to Home Depot, pick up some people who are willing to come through and do a good paint job. Right?
Paint is painting.
You just paint. Easy work.
Every contractor, every person has done paint.
Some paint. So we pull up to the Home Depot. I walk around. I talk to some good people. I find someone who's like, yeah, I can do it. I got 3 people. We can come through tonight and have it done tonight. I'm like, bet. What? How much?
Remind me of Kevin Hart. Bet.
I'm like, bet. I'm like, bet. Let's go. Come through. How much? He says something like, I think $120, $150. I'm thinking they're doing 3 rooms. Material we purchased, $150, have it done tonight. Easy deal. They come through the house. They got some half rollers, or I bought some rollers in, but they don't use my stuff for whatever reason. They get in there. They don't put paint on the baseboards or the ceiling.
They don't put tape.
They don't put tape. What did I say?
Paint. That they did do.
They did.
They definitely put some paint on our baseboards and ceiling.
Yeah, so they don't put tape to frame the ceiling and the baseboard so that you only get wall. They don't put newspaper down on the floor so that you don't get paint on the floors. And they just go in there and try to get the job done as soon as possible. So they're just painting, not even going in the.
They didn't tell us they needed more paint. So we got them like 3 buckets or whatever, and they didn't tell us till later. I was like, this is not even done. They were like, oh, you needed more paint. I'm like, why did you tell us we needed more paint? I could have gone and get more paint.
It wasn't done. It wasn't even. It was in all different directions. And it was all over the floor. And I still had to pay these people $150. And then we had to then go like the next day or 2 days later, actually get more paint, put tape down. We had our friend Deja come through, who's been on the podcast before. Shout out to Deja Easter, DejaEaster.com. Go ahead and check her out. But she came through and helped us paint it correctly. But again, double the time and maybe double or 2/3 the money. Where we could have just hired someone the first time to do it correctly, a professional, it would have got done faster and it would have been more affordable. So my lesson to you all is get it done right. Do not get it done cheaply.
I want to expand on the way you say it makes it sound so nice. I feel bad for Deja because do you remember why she was there?
No, why was she there?
We were driving up to Lake Tahoe.
That's right.
Or no, we were driving up to the bay for New Year's Eve. We were just like,
years.
we just need to stop by. Mind you, we're not painters either. So I was like, it seems like a really quick job. We'll just cover the spaces that they didn't get. So we're just going to stop by our condo on the way. She's like, oh, fine, bet. We were there for easily 3 hours. We had her working. She's in there sweating. At some point, I'm like, I feel bad for her. At least I was just stopping by. We got her in there working.
Paint all in her hair.
Like, what in the world did I get myself into? Y'all was just supposed to drive me up, and y'all got me doing a whole paint job. What is this?
Hey, welcome to the life of
I'm sorry, girl. We appreciate you. You were a real one for that.
For sure. But yeah, lessons learned. So now, Queen, are we to the point where people should be asking themselves?
Yes, you should be asking yourself all of this. Do you want
all of this?
Are you going to manage your property yourself, or are you going to hire someone to do it? I'm going to be honest with you. I would recommend doing it at least for the first year, and at least maybe for your first tenant. And the reason I would recommend is that even if you're going to hire someone else to do that, you want to let them know what things to look out for, right? And if you have had experience with it, you know what to look for. You know what things to, ask the property manager that you're hiring. Do you do this? Do you do that? Right? Because those are things that you did for your own property. Right. So I would recommend getting familiar with the property management experience by managing for at least your first year, just to get your feet wet a little bit and know what it takes. That's what I would recommend. So even if you don't have the plan to do it long term, I would recommend doing it at least for the first year. And again, you don't need to let the tenant know that you own the property. You could just introduce yourself as the property manager. Yep. But I would recommend doing it.
Is your answer the same for short-term rentals?
No. My answer is not the same for short-term rentals because I think for short-term rentals, you need to be available. I don't see it working out if you have a full-time job. Because if somebody leaves on Monday and the next person is checking in on Tuesday, are you going to go over at 8:00 at night afterwards and, do a full cleaning and again, it kind of does depend on the level of managing that needs to be happening. If you're going to do the cleaning yourself, which I wouldn't recommend, no, I guess it depends. It depends. Maybe you're just hiring someone.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can still do it. But just keep in mind it's going to be more hands-on for a short-term rental because again, all the things that I mentioned, you're going to be doing every time someone comes and leaves. So, I would say, I think it would still probably be a good experience for maybe a first couple months. I don't think you need to do it for a year, but maybe for the first couple months because you'll get probably a few, months of, a few tenants, a few occupants, coming in and out within a month or two. But I would say, even there, I think I would recommend doing it for the first couple months versus the first year for long term.
Okay. Another case scenario for you. So we have property that you own, you're renting out long term, and you are in reaching distance to it.
Mm-hmm.
What if the property is in another state? Now, do you have a different recommendation on whether the person property manages themselves or they outsource?
I definitely think that if you do not live within driving distance, you should hire a property manager, period. I think it is personally, I think it is too difficult to manage a property that you cannot put eyes on in a couple of hours if you needed to. That is my personal opinion. Whether it's, again, for an inspection, whether it's, you're trying to get a plumber there, but you need to see it to actually be able to say what's wrong. Like, there's been a couple of times where it's like, I gotta go see what's happening here. So I think that's difficult if you're managing a property a state away, a flight away. That's difficult. Even for the inspection, if you want to do an inspection twice a year, that's also, I think, going to incur a lot of cost to go fly to wherever you need to go, or to go drive 6 hours, and just a lot of time and effort. So my personal opinion is that if you're investing out of state or somewhere where it's not an easy drive, that you go ahead and hire somebody who, again, can put eyes on the property at any moment if they needed to. Yeah. And they're also going to be familiar with that, those cities' laws, those policies. So I would, again, if you are living in the area, then you're probably semi-familiar with the laws and policies. But if you're investing in an area that you're not living in and that you're not familiar with, you want to hire somebody who is familiar with the property management, policies, laws, tenant laws, and everything in that area. That will be my recommendation. But, for us, our unit is hour and a half away. So that's doable. It's not something I'm doing all the time, but if I need to go deliver this letter, like, I can set out time to make that drive in any given day. But yeah, even for those, again, those types of things where this is a notice I have to hand to the tenant. If you are not within driving distance, that's going to be a whole thing. And I think it does make it a little bit more difficult to manage it and keep the costs down if you are not able to go and do some of those easy things yourself. So yeah, I would say, again, if you're driving distance, and something that you could go and do on a drop of a dime if you needed to, then I would say it might be a good thing to consider property managing it for the first year. If we're out of state, go ahead and hire somebody. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is the cost, because your property managers are not free. So you need to, if you're going to hire somebody, you need to cushion 10 to 15% of the rent to the property manager, because that is monthly. That is what they're going to charge typically to manage your property. So that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Again, if we're talking about an out-of-state unit, you not only need to figure out what your mortgage is, you need to figure out what the property management fee is going to be on top of the rent, so that you can adequately figure out, like, okay, how much monthly cash flow am I going to make? Because you have to subtract the property management fee. So I definitely would recommend it out of state, but you need to make sure that you can afford it as well.
Yeah. And I think when you hear the 10 to 15%, it might sound like, oh man, that's a lot of money. But if it's a $2,000 rental unit, 10% would be $200 to like $300 per month for you to not have to do really any work.
Right.
So when you think about it like that, it's a drop in the bucket for turning that investment into actual passive income instead of active income. So definitely something to consider. But if you haven't already, put inside the chat, put inside the comments, which you're going to select. Are you going to select being the property manager over the unit? You're going to be scheduling the cleaning, the plumbing, you're going to be interviewing, doing the tours, you're going to be doing that hands-on work? Or are you going to go ahead and outsource that out to a property management position, job, firm that can do it for you and pay that 10 to 15% so everything can be on autopilot and you can run your business, job, travel, do what you want to do without having to worry about it? Drop that inside the chat. Are you going to property manage, or are you going to outsource the property management?
Excellent.
Yes, ma'am.
We want to know what you decide. I think for us, ultimately, the decision was, when we did move out, there wasn't a lot of cushion between the rent that we were able to charge and our mortgage. So paying the property taxes would have literally been an out-of-pocket expense. Our property manager would have been an out-of-pocket expense for us each month. We do live within driving distance. And I wanted that experience. Like, I know I want to be a real estate investor, a real estate professional. So having some property management experience under my belt, I think would be helpful. It's also the first property we ever owned. And it's like, oh, that's still, you do have to kind of emotionally detach yourself once you move out. I will say that. But for that first year, it was still like, oh, this is our space. So like, I want to make sure that it is treated well.
Something that we didn't talk about and we won't go into because we're not professionals on it, but the tax strategy of being the property manager. There's a certain amount of hours that you need as a real estate professional in order to get more tax deductions, accelerated appreciation, all that from your investment units. Whereas if you outsource it, it's going to be harder to get those hours to become a real estate professional to get the taxes. So that's a whole different strategy. We won't go into it here, but you check out Carlton Dennis's YouTube channel. He has a whole bunch of stuff on accelerated depreciation and being a real estate professional.
Yep. So last thing I want to leave you all with is just some resources. If you do decide, like, you know what, I'm going to take the advice, I'm going to manage my property for the first year, you want to make sure that you have a lot of resources in your toolbox because it is work. And so, apartments.com is what I would recommend. It may not work for everybody, but at this point, we've paid nothing to apartments.com.
They don't take a transaction fee or nothing?
Not that I'm aware of. But now I'm gonna look into it. And I'm like, okay, I'll make sure. But I don't think they take any percentage of our rent. My understanding is their money comes from applications. So every time a tenant submits an application, they do have to pay. But if you're managing 1 to 2 rental units, I think apartments.com is a great place to start because you can create your lease on there. You can collect your rent payments on there. You can set up an automatic late rent fee. It also has a lot of automatic emails. Like again, when rent is due, when it's late, it automatically sends the email to the client. So it saves you a lot of time from manually having to do those things. So I would definitely recommend it. And then you can also track your expenses very easily in there. So if you need to go in at the end of the year and figure out how much money did I spend on operating costs here, you can very easily find it. So that's definitely something that I would recommend as a starter tool for property managers. Bigger Pockets is a great just education space. And they also have a lot of cool tools. Some of them are free. Some of them, you got to pay their membership. But I think that that's also a great place. If you are just unsure, go in there. They've got a forum. You can ask questions to other people in your area. That's a great place just for knowledge of what do I do in this scenario. They also, I think, have some templates for some things as well. So great place to go. Rent Cafe is a good place for if you're determining comparable rents. They have a lot of good resources there. And then lastly, if you are trying to create some forms, you don't know where to start, you want to create a lease, you need a 3-day notice, eForms is a great place to go where you can get templates of these forms based on your state. They offer a 7-day free trial. So if you just need one, just go and
hop on,
and then cancel if you need to. Otherwise, you could keep it going. If you know you're going to need to do this every year, that might be.
Say all that again, just in case it didn't get picked up by the mic, because it was a good nugget.
Okay.
Yes.
eForms.com is a great place where they have templates of different documents, leases, 3-day notices, that type of thing. So if you're like, I need to create this lease, I don't know where to start, that's a place to go where you can just answer the questions. And they have a 7-day free trial. So if I just need to go in and create this one document, go in, do it, download it, and you can download it as a Word. So if you need to go back and make changes, you can. And then you can just cancel it before the 7th day if you don't want to get charged. Otherwise, if you're going to continue using it, just go ahead and pay that membership, bake it into your operating expenses.
So the cheap person to me is so in those 7 days, can you just download all the templates, everything that you would need, Word. We got the rental release, we got the eviction, we got just download all of them and then cancel. And then now you have them all in Word and you can change them.
It's an interesting thought that I wish I had asked you before I just canceled my 7-day free trial.
Come on, you got to consult with me on these things.
Sorry.
We got more than one email.
I was just about to say we can create it even. Before come after us.
Don't come after us. And if you do, let's make a partnership out of this, right?
Right.
Let's make it work.
We definitely used your service. It was great.
For sure.
But yeah, those are just some tools to get you started. Again, I think people get very scared to manage their property. And there are pros and cons to any job. It's not super glamorous, but again, I think it's great for you to get experience. If you want to be a real estate investor, you got to be experienced on all different fronts. So I think managing the property for at least, again, a couple of months for short term and the first year for long term, I would recommend it. So you know what you're talking about when you then need to maybe hire a property manager. So hopefully this was helpful, kind of give you some checklists of things to do, places to start. Again, we're not experts. We're just giving you our experience from the first couple years of us managing our condos. So hopefully this was helpful.
Oh yeah, I think it was great. And speaking of short term versus long term, we try to make these videos like 30 to 40 minutes. I don't know where we're at right now, but I guarantee we're at like 57,
Really?
106.
Higher?
Guaranteed. Guaranteed. I know it. But again, like the Queen said, hopefully y'all got a lot of value out of this. We didn't want to, rush through the information, but there's still even more to discuss after this, right? So definitely make sure y'all stay tapped in. Make sure y'all like and follow the M4 Show on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere that you see podcasts. And if you're interested in buying real estate, bring a friend. Bring a friend to the community. Share the video with a friend. That way y'all can build together and have that mindset, that village of people that are investing together. With that being said, we appreciate y'all. I'm Devon Travell, creator of Black Wall Street, the board game.
And I'm Sinclair, aka the Health Nerd.
Make sure y'all secure the marriage. Make sure y'all secure the love. And of course, make sure y'all secure the bag. Peace.